Professor Zel'thar had been teaching galactic evolutionary biology for 73 cycles. In all that time, not once had a student interrupted her lecture on extinct Deathworld species. The Vryn instructor prided herself on her comprehensive documentation of every known civilization that had evolved on Class 9 and Class 10 mortality worlds. Those unfortunate planets where the environment itself seemed specifically designed to kill anything stupid enough to develop sentience there. "And so we conclude," she announced to her class of 200 graduate students, her 4 eyes gleaming with academic satisfaction, "that while Deathworld species occasionally achieve primitive spaceflight, none have ever survived long enough to join the galactic community. The psychological damage inflicted by constant survival pressure inevitably leads to self-destruction. It is, tragically, a universal constant." That's when the human in the back row raised his hand. Zel'thar blinked all 4 eyes in rapid succession, a Vryn expression of profound confusion. She'd been teaching this course for decades. Never, and she meant never, had anyone questioned the fundamental axiom that Deathworld species were extinct. It was like questioning whether vacuum existed in space or whether the speed of light was fast. Some things were simply established facts. "Yes?" she said cautiously, her translator struggling slightly with the uncertainty in her voice. The human stood up. He was tall, unnecessarily tall, in Zel'thar's opinion, and built like someone who'd taken evolution's suggestion of adequate muscle mass for survival, and decided to interpret it as a personal challenge. His designation was David Morrison, according to her class roster, and he'd enrolled just last cycle claiming to be interested in comparative biology of extreme environments. She should have seen the red flags. She really should have. "I don't mean to be rude, Professor," David said, his tone polite but firm. "But I'm literally standing right here. From Earth, which is a Class 10 death world. And I'm pretty sure I'm not extinct." The classroom fell silent. 200 students representing 47 species turned to stare at the human with expressions ranging from fascination to outright horror. A Quilnari student in the 3rd row made a sound like air escaping from a pressure seal and slumped sideways, its gelatinous body making an unfortunate squelching sound as it hit the floor. Zel'thar felt her breathing spiracles constrict. That's not possible." "Yeah, I get that a lot," David continued, his confidence building as he realized he had the floor. "But here's the thing. Earth has predators that can run down prey for literal days until they collapse from exhaustion, weather systems that regularly spawn city-destroying vortexes we call Tuesday in Oklahoma, insects that can kill you with anaphylactic shock, mammals that weigh 8 tons and are territorially aggressive, reptiles that have survived mostly unchanged for 200 million years because they're already perfect killing machines, microscopic organisms that can shut down your organs in under 48 hours, plants that can cause weeks of agonizing pain from casual contact, and oceanic pressure systems that make your standard starship look like a paper bag. Also, our planet is 70% covered in a substance that will kill you if you breathe it." He paused for breath. Nobody interrupted. "Oh, and everything on Earth is either trying to eat everything else, mate with everything else, or both. Sometimes simultaneously. It's basically the galaxy's worst theme park." A HLIC student raised one of its 7 tentacles tremulously. But the psychological damage, the evolutionary trauma. Surely your species must be barely functional, plagued by aggression disorders and paranoid survival instincts." David considered this. "I mean, we did invent something called extreme sports where we voluntarily throw ourselves off cliffs attached to fabric canopies for fun. We also invented a sport where you strap wood to your feet and slide down frozen mountains at speeds that can kill you. Another one involves deliberately crashing into each other at high velocity while wearing minimal protective gear and fighting over a rubber disc. For entertainment." "By the convergence," whispered a Nathrine student, its fur standing on end. "Yeah, that's not even the weird part," David continued. "The weird part is we do this stuff recreationally. Like, we survive all the nightmare scenarios Earth throws at us, and then we're like, you know what would make this better? If we made it more dangerous. Also, let's film it and put it on the internet." Professor Zel'thar's training kicked in. When confronted with data that challenges your framework, Verify your sources. Surely you're exaggerating. No species could evolve sapience under such conditions without developing severe psychological dysfunctions that would prevent civilization formation. Oh, we have those, David said with disarming honesty. We just decided civilization was more important and built it anyway. Humans are really good at doing stuff that doesn't make sense. It's kind of our thing. He pulled out his personal data pad. A human design that Zel'thar noted with some alarm appeared to have survived significant kinetic damage, and was held together with what looked like determination and improvised repairs. Here, let me pull up some basic facts about Earth for everyone. This should all be in the galactic database, but I'm guessing nobody's actually looked. An image appeared on the classroom's central holographic display. It showed a blue-green planet that looked, at first glance, almost peaceful. Then David started adding data overlays. Earth gravity, 1.0 standard. Which might sound reasonable until you realize that standard was calibrated based on the average of existing member species when the measurement system was established. Earth's gravity is actually on the higher end. We're basically living with what most species would consider heavy load training conditions. All the time. Since birth. A murmur ran through the classroom. The Quilnari student who'd fainted was being tended to by a classmate, but upon hearing David's explanation, fainted again with a wet slapping sound. Earth atmospheric composition. David continued, warming to his subject. 21% oxygen. I know what you're thinking. That seems reasonable. Except oxygen is an incredibly reactive substance that causes fires and rapid oxidization. We evolved to breathe something that, in high concentrations, would be classified as a dangerous industrial chemical on most civilized worlds. Our cells literally use controlled oxidization as their primary energy source. We run on contained combustion. A Vrel student raised a claw nervously. Surely that's an exaggeration. We call it metabolism, David interrupted. And when it stops working, we die. Usually in about 3 to 5 minutes without oxygen. We're that dependent on our controlled burning process. Professor Zel'thar felt a headache forming behind her primary eyes. This must be some sort of elaborate prank. The galactic database clearly lists Earth as a surveyed world with extreme environmental conditions. Yeah, but not as inhabited, David said. That's actually the problem. See, Earth was surveyed about 130 years ago by a Clorn expedition. They did a flyby, saw the surface conditions, active tectonics, extreme weather, high oxygen content, dangerous megafauna, and classified it as Class 10, no sapient life detected. Which was fair at the time because we'd only just invented radio and our electromagnetic signature was barely detectable. They marked it as unsuitable for colonization and moved on. But then you developed spaceflight, Zel'thar said slowly. We developed a lot of things, David corrected. Radio, nuclear power, computers, satellites, space stations, and eventually FTL capability. About 12 years ago, we figured out the basics of faster-than-light travel through our own research. Took us about 30 years from theoretical physics to functional prototype. Then we started exploring, found some of your trade beacons, followed them to a border station, and introduced ourselves. A Filthrene student looked up from frantic note-taking. Wait, you achieved FTL independently? Without any outside assistance? Well, we had some theories from observing distant FTL signatures, but yeah, we worked it out ourselves, David said. The physics are tricky, but not unreasonable once you stop thinking about space as fixed. Anyway, we showed up at Outpost Kepler 7 about 12 years back, very politely introduced ourselves, and asked about joining the galactic community. And nobody noticed you were from a Class 10 Deathworld? Zel'thar's voice had climbed into a higher register. Here's the thing, David said, and his tone shifted slightly. Less academic, more careful. The station administrator checked our homeworld designation in the database, saw it was listed as Class 10, surveyed, no sapient life, and assumed we'd made an error in our documentation. He figured we meant a different planet in our system, maybe a moon or something with gentler conditions. We didn't correct him because, honestly, we weren't sure how you'd all react to finding out we were from Earth specifically. He glanced around the room. Humans look relatively normal, right? 2 arms, 2 legs, 1 head, bilateral symmetry. We fit into standard environmental suits. Our biology isn't immediately obviously extreme until you examine it closely. And most people don't because, that would be rude. So we just let people assume. We said we were from the Sol system, third planet, and left it at that. Technically true. Just not the whole truth. You've been hiding this for 12 years? A Nathrine student's fur was standing completely on end now. We weren't hiding it, David said. We just weren't advertising it. There's a difference. Any xenobiologist who actually looked up Earth's environmental specs would see the Class 10 rating right there in the database. It's public information. Nobody looked because the assumption was that Class 10 worlds don't have sapient life. Your own textbooks say it's theoretically impossible. He gestured at Professor Zel'thar. That's why I took this class. Because I realized that the galaxy's academic community has been teaching incorrect information for over a century, and someone needed to point it out. That someone turned out to be me. The classroom had gone from shocked, to stunned, to something approaching existential crisis. Professor Zel'thar forced her breathing spiracles to regulate. How many humans are there? About 8 billion on Earth, David said. Give or take. We're pretty good at reproduction. Another side effect of evolving on a world with high mortality rates. We developed strong drives to maintain population levels. Plus we've got maybe 200,000 living off-world now, spread across various stations, trading posts, and colonies in galactic community space. 200,000. The number settled over the classroom like a weight. A Vrel student raised a claw slowly. 200,000 humans have been living among us, and nobody noticed they were from a death world? Well, it's not like we were actively deceiving anyone, David said. Most people just don't ask about homeworld environmental conditions in casual conversation. Hi, I'm David. My planet has continent-destroying weather patterns and predators that can smell fear. Not exactly a great icebreaker. We talked about our jobs, our interests, our families. Normal stuff. The fact that we evolved in extreme conditions just never came up organically. He pulled up another file. But here's what I want you to understand. Yes, Earth is a Class 10 death world. Yes, we have all these extreme survival adaptations. But we also developed art, music, literature, philosophy, and ethics. We created beauty in a hostile environment. We found meaning in struggle. We built a civilization that values cooperation over competition, knowledge over ignorance, and progress over stagnation. David's expression turned earnest. We didn't survive Earth just to be survivors. We wanted to thrive, to create, to understand, to connect with others. That's why we joined the galactic community. Not because we needed protection, but because we genuinely wanted to be part of something larger than ourselves. You could have survived alone, Zel'thar said quietly. Survival isn't the same as living, David replied. We spent thousands of years surviving on Earth. Then we reached the stars and found out we weren't alone in the universe. That was the best day in human history. Meeting you all, learning about different civilizations, experiencing new cultures. That's what makes existence meaningful. Not just surviving, connecting. The silence that followed was different from before. Less shocked, more contemplative. Finally, Zel'thar stood up. I think we need to extend this class session. David, would you be willing to give a comprehensive presentation about human evolution, Earth's environmental conditions, and how your species achieved sapience under these circumstances? Absolutely, David said. Fair warning, though. Some of this is going to sound unbelievable. Just remember that I'm standing here proving it's possible. Someone please assist our Quilnari colleague, Zel'thar added, noticing the student was still unconscious, being supported by two concerned classmates. And everyone, prepare yourselves. I suspect we're about to have our understanding of evolutionary biology fundamentally revised. 4 hours later, the classroom looked like the aftermath of an intellectual earthquake. Students sat in clusters, voices overlapping in excited debate. Professor Zel'thar had filled 3 data tablets with notes. The Quilnari student had been taken to the medical center after fainting a 3rd time during David's explanation of human immune system function, and was reportedly stable but requesting sedatives. David had walked them through human evolutionary history, biological systems, cultural development, and technological advancement. He'd answered questions ranging from, how do you survive childbirth with those skull proportions? To, why do humans keep predators as companions? With patience and remarkable good humor, now as the last students filed out in animated discussion groups, Zel'thar approached David. That was the most intellectually challenging 4 hours of my 73 cycles in academia, she said honestly. You've fundamentally challenged everything I thought I knew about Deathworld evolution. I hope I didn't destroy your life's work, David said with genuine concern. You didn't destroy it. You corrected it, Zel'thar said firmly. I've been studying the failures without understanding what success would look like. Now I do. She paused, then made a decision. I want to collaborate with you on your graduate thesis. This needs to be published, peer-reviewed, and distributed throughout the academic community. We need to revise our survey protocols for Class 9 and 10 worlds immediately. There might be other species like yours that we've dismissed based on faulty assumptions. David's face lit up. You're serious? Completely, Zel'thar said. This is paradigm-shifting research. It needs to be done right, with proper academic rigor and peer review. And I want to help you do it. David extended his hand in the human gesture of agreement. Zel'thar grasped it carefully with one of her own hands, noting the strength in his grip. Controlled, not aggressive, but undeniably present. One question, she said. Why didn't any of the other 200,000 humans mention this earlier? In 12 years, surely someone would have brought it up. David's expression turned slightly rueful. Actually, a few have tried. Dr. Elizabeth Reeves published a paper 7 years ago titled Reconsidering Class 10 Viability, a Case Study. It was rejected by 3 major journals as speculative fiction and biologically implausible. Professor Harold Kim gave a presentation at the Xenobiology conference 5 years ago. He was politely told that anecdotal evidence wasn't sufficient to overturn established theory. A handful of others made attempts through various channels. And nobody listened, Zel'thar said, feeling a weight of academic shame settle on her. People hear what they're ready to hear, David said without bitterness. The paradigm was too entrenched. Nobody wanted to believe that their foundational assumptions were wrong. I'm hoping that doing this properly, through graduate research, with a respected professor as co-author, with comprehensive documentation, will finally get the message through. Zel'thar straightened her shoulders. Then let's make sure it does. We'll need to compile comprehensive biological data, evolutionary analysis, cultural development studies, and comparative analysis with other known Deathworld species. This is going to be extensive work. I've got time, David said with a slight smile. Humans are persistent. It's kind of our thing. Yes, Zel'thar agreed, looking at him with all 4 eyes. I'm beginning to understand that. 6 months later, the Joint Symposium on Extreme Environment Evolution was held at Galactic Core University. 1,200 xenobiologists from across known space attended in person, with another 8,000 participating remotely. Professor Zel'thar stood at the podium, David Morrison beside her. Behind them, a holographic display showed the title of their joint research paper, Deathworld Sapience, a comprehensive analysis of human evolution and revised protocols for Class 9-10 world evaluation. For 73 cycles, Zel'thar began, I taught that Deathworld species could not achieve lasting sapience. I was wrong. Today, we present evidence that will require us to fundamentally revise our understanding of extreme environment evolution. The presentation took 3 hours. When it concluded, the auditorium erupted, not in applause but in furious debate. Questions flew from every corner. Challenges were raised and methodically addressed. Data was scrutinized with appropriate academic rigor. By the end, a consensus emerged. The evidence was undeniable. Humans existed. Earth was a Class 10 death world. The theoretical framework needed revision. The Galactic Biology Board voted unanimously to implement new survey protocols for high-mortality worlds, mandating active searches for sapient life signs, rather than assuming lifelessness based on environmental conditions alone. As the symposium concluded and attendees filed out in clusters of animated discussion, David found Professor Zel'thar standing quietly near the display showing Earth's environmental data.